One late afternoon on Tatooine, Shmi Skywalker was writhing in pain going into labor. It was a lonely and mysterious moment, marked by the arrival of a special child, generated directly by the Force. Shmi knew that Anakin, as she would call him, was no ordinary baby. He carried with him something that, for her, was still inexplicable. Tatooine, with its arid and isolated setting, seemed a strange stage for the birth of someone so unique, but perhaps it was the perfect place to keep the mystery surrounding the boy hidden. The Force had chosen its path and, it seemed, destined Anakin for something great, something that would shape the future of the galaxy. In a distant corner of the galaxy, on a forgotten and isolated planet, lived a Jedi who had been away from the Order for many years. His name was Yelder Lame, a reclusive master with a deep and unique connection to the Force. Over the years, Yelder had dedicated himself to understanding this all-pervading energy. He wasn't like the other Jedi, who rigidly followed the rules and dogmas of the Order. He believed that there was more to discover and, perhaps for this reason, he set out to explore the mysteries of the Force in a free and intuitive way, seeking answers that the Order would never give him. Yelder began his journey as Jocasta Nu's Padawan, before she took over his responsibilities as librarian at the Jedi Temple on Coruscant. Under Jocasta's tutelage, he learned to value knowledge not just as a tool, but as a path to understanding the Force. Jocasta, with her experience and wisdom, always encouraged the young Padawan to immerse himself in his studies. However, while most apprentices were content to follow the traditional path, Yelder felt a restlessness that pushed him towards deeper questions, searching for the meaning of existing between light and shadow. The Jedi Library at the Temple of Coruscant was Yelder's favorite place. He would spend hours reading ancient texts and debating with Jocasta Nu on complex topics of Jedi philosophy. Their conversations went beyond the standard teachings. They talked about the nature of the Force, the essence of life, and even the mysteries that not even the Jedi had fully unraveled. Jocasta respected their thirst for knowledge, and the debates were heated, but always with mutual respect. The quiet atmosphere of the library was the place where Yelder could explore his ideas without being judged, something he valued deeply. Over time, Yelder became a true expert in Jedi scripture, delving into documents and texts that few people bothered to read. He believed that the answers to the dilemmas of Jedi life were there, hidden among the ancient words, waiting for someone to understand them. In his readings, he found traces of wisdom that seemed to have been forgotten or ignored by the modern order. He began to see the Jedi not just as guardians of peace, but as complex beings, connected to a force that went beyond what any code could define. For him, studying the scriptures was a way of connecting with the Jedi of the past and somehow understanding his own path. It was then that he began to question the methods of the Jedi Order. For Yelder, the Jedi ideal of detachment and suppression of emotions seemed limited. He wondered if the Order wasn't moving away from the true essence of the Force by imposing so many restrictions. Emotions, he thought, were part of the human condition and also of any Force-sensitive being. How could anyone understand the totality of the Force without knowing themselves deeply, including their own shadows? This view put him at odds with Jedi dogma, but Yelder believed that the way to complete understanding was through balance, not repression. For Yelder, the truly complete Jedi should not suppress the dark side, but get to know it and learn to master it. He argued that self-mastery included accepting the parts that the Order preferred to ignore. For him, the Force was not just light, and total mastery required the Jedi to understand the dark, but without losing himself in it. This perspective made him a dissident. The Order believed that any flirtation with the dark side was dangerous, but Yelder saw it as an opportunity for growth. After all, how could they fight what they didn't understand? His conviction led him down a lonely path, in search of balance and understanding. Finally, at a young age, Yelder made the difficult decision to leave the Jedi Order. He knew that his path would be a lonely one, but he felt that his quest for knowledge and understanding of the Force could not be achieved within the constraints imposed by the Order. When he left, Yelder felt no resentment. On the contrary, he understood the importance of the Order and the vital role it played in the galaxy. However, his destiny seemed to lie elsewhere, where he could explore the mysteries of the Force without restrictions. Yelder, now isolated from any Jedi mission, dedicated himself entirely to deepening his knowledge of the Force. Away from the hustle and bustle of the galaxy, the missions and the restrictions of the Order, he could finally put into practice everything he had read in the ancient Jedi archives and learned in long conversations with his master Jocasta Nu. Every reading, every insight, now took on new life in his personal quest for an absolute understanding of the Force. He felt that, outside the obligations and expectations imposed on the Jedi, he could experience a purer and more authentic connection with this primordial energy. Immersing himself in states of deep meditation, Yelder began to access layers of the Force that few Jedi dared to explore. It was an intense process, requiring a subtle balance between body, mind, and spirit. In his solitude, he allowed himself to go beyond ordinary limits, experiencing sensations and visions that confirmed, in practice, much of what he had only imagined in theory. With each meditation, each inner journey, he felt more connected and understood the Force as a living entity that pulsed inside and outside him. Over time, Yelder developed and perfected various techniques for connecting with the Force, some of them so advanced that they were unknown to most Jedi. He experimented with ancient methods, blended forgotten teachings, and even created his own practices. In his isolation, Yelder became a true alchemist of the Force, transforming theoretical knowledge into practical experience. He felt that the Force was guiding him, showing him unique paths, unknown even to the most renowned masters of the Jedi Temple. One technique that Yelder particularly mastered was communicating with Force ghosts, a rare skill little understood by most Jedi. He felt that this practice allowed him to tap into ancient wisdom, connecting with old masters and absorbing lessons that went far beyond written records. This technique, later taught by Yoda to Obi-Wan to communicate with Qui-Gon Jinn, required total surrender and absolute mastery of the Force, which Yelder acquired over years of intense practice. Over the years, Yelder became a true master of the Force, a Jedi who transcended common knowledge and acquired an incomparable depth. His connection with the Force was so intense that he seemed to feel the vibrations of the galaxy, as if he were part of every being, every atom. He knew that his role in the universe was special and, even in his solitude, he understood that the Force was preparing him for something great. What he didn't yet know was that the Force had plans that would lead him to a new purpose. One day, during one of his meditations, Yelder was interrupted by a powerful disturbance in the Force. It was an overwhelming sensation, as if a significant change was about to take place. This interference didn't seem like a simple disturbance, but rather the harbinger of an event that would alter the balance of the galaxy. Yelder remained motionless, attentive to what the Force was revealing to him, sensing that something very important had happened. Soon after feeling this turbulence, Yelder was surprised by the appearance of a Force ghost. Before him, the being introduced himself as Jolee Bindo, a Jedi from past eras, known for his wisdom and independent views. Yelder, as a scholar of Jedi history, knew that Jolee was an important Jedi during the Old Republic, someone who questioned the Order and its restrictions in a similar way to himself. Jolie's appearance didn't seem like a simple coincidence, but rather a sign that the Force was guiding him towards something greater. Jolee Bindo then spoke with a tone of urgency and reverence. The Force has generated a being directly from it, a being with a power so great that it can bring balance to the Force. His words were clear, and the weight of the revelation caused Yelder to reflect deeply. That being, created by the Force itself, was a rare and great event, something the galaxy had never seen before. Yelder felt he was facing one of the deepest mysteries of existence. As a dedicated scholar, Yelder immediately recognized the description. It was the prophecy of the Chosen One, an ancient legend about a being destined to restore the balance of the Force. He looked at Jolee with admiration and respect, understanding the magnitude of that revelation. "Are you referring to the prophecy of the One?" he asked, his voice heavy with expectation. Jolee confirmed with a nod, and Yelder realized that the disturbance he had felt moments before was directly linked to the birth of this being. Jolee continued, "Yes, and I'm here because the Force has guided you to this very moment. Everything you've lived through, all the skills you've developed, have made you the Jedi you are today. Now that you're ready, the Force has given birth to the Chosen One, Jolie's words echoed in Yelder's mind, as if every moment of his life had led him to that moment. He was beginning to understand that his solitary journey and intense training had been part of a greater plan. Faced with Jolie's words, Yelder wondered what it meant to be ready. He felt honored, but also uncertain about what the Force expected of him. "Ready for what?" he asked, with humility and curiosity. Jolie's answer was direct and revealing: to train the Chosen One. Yelder, who had always sought a deeper understanding of the Force, now had a mission that went beyond any responsibility he had ever assumed. The mission entrusted to him was not just to train a Jedi. It was to prepare someone destined to restore the balance of the Force. Jolie explained that the Chosen One was a special, unique being who needed a special master in order to be understood and guided. The complexity and potential of that being required a mentor who knew both the light and the shadow, someone who was able to guide with wisdom and empathy. Yelder, realizing the importance of his new mission, felt a mixture of responsibility and excitement. He knew that his role would be crucial to the destiny of the Chosen One, and that his own knowledge and experience made him the ideal teacher for this task. All his life, he had been preparing, often without knowing it, for this moment. Now, in Jolie's presence, he finally understood the reason for his solitary journey and his departure from the Order. With each revelation, Yelder felt the Force pulsing more intensely within him. He was facing a mission that would transcend his own life and shape the future of the galaxy. And although he had spent years in solitude, he now knew that he had never really been alone. The Force had guided him every step of the way, preparing him to be the Chosen One's mentor. Jolie, with her wisdom and vision of the future, told Yelder that he should take the boy and his mother to Kashyyyk, a distant planet dense in natural life, where Jolie had spent many of her years. Kashyyyk, home of the Wookiees, had an intense and mysterious energy that reverberated in harmony with the Force. According to Jolie, that environment would help Anakin grow away from the negative influences of Tatooine and provide him with a place of peace and introspection, ideal for developing his skills. Without hesitation, Yelder set off towards Tatooine. He knew that the task assigned to him was difficult, but he trusted in the Force to guide him to young Anakin and his mother. Arriving on the desert planet in the still, silent dawn, Yelder allowed the Force to lead him to where the boy would be. He closed his eyes, concentrating on the vibrations of the place, feeling every presence around him, until a deep feeling guided him to Shmi Skywalker's home. When he finally found Shmi, Yelder introduced himself to her and explained why he was there. He talked about the Force and mentioned the prophecy, leaving her surprised and wary, but reassured at the same time. Shmi, realizing that Yelder knew about the miracle of his son from a fatherless conception, and sensing a genuine kindness in the Jedi, agreed to accompany him. The Force seemed to envelop them, allowing them to leave Tatooine unnoticed by their master Watto, escaping the prying eyes and dangers that resided there. When they reached Kashyyyk, Yelder once again let himself be guided by the Force, which led him to an abandoned hut in the heart of the dense, vibrant forest. The place, isolated and full of life, seemed perfect for the mission ahead of him. With a sturdy wooden roof and a clearing around it, the hut seemed protected by the very spirits of the trees. It was there that they decided to settle down, and Yelder knew that this refuge would be the starting point for young Anakin's training. It wasn't long before Yelder began training Anakin. As soon as the boy learned to walk and talk, Yelder introduced the first breathing and concentration exercises, showing the little Jedi the initial secrets of the Force. He taught Anakin how to feel the flow of energy around him, to calm his mind and to listen to the whisper of the Force in the silence of the forest. Even at such a young age, Anakin showed an innate talent for absorbing these lessons, and Yelder felt he was facing someone truly special. As the years went by, Yelder became more and more impressed with Anakin's talent and connection to the Force. The boy's intelligence was sharp, and he showed an innate curiosity for everything involving mechanics and flight. From an early age, Anakin loved dismantling and reassembling objects, and often improvised parts and gadgets with the few resources he had. This natural talent and contagious enthusiasm filled Yelder with pride and reinforced his confidence in the boy's potential. When Anakin was ready, Yelder decided to give him his first training saber. The moment was marked by a mixture of pride and responsibility, as he knew he was giving Anakin one of the most symbolic tools of the Jedi path. However, shortly after this milestone, during one of his meditation sessions, Yelder was visited by Jolee. The former Jedi suggested that he start letting Anakin spend some time away from his mother, encouraging the boy to develop emotional autonomy. From that day on, Jolee visited Yelder quite often, offering specific guidance for Anakin's training. He showed Yelder the subtle and profound aspects of Jedi training that required care and understanding. Jolee knew that Anakin possessed a unique power, and that his emotional development would be crucial in preventing his strength from turning against him. These conversations were of immense help to Yelder, who welcomed Jolee's guidance with gratitude and respect. The atmosphere on Kashyyyk, with Yelder's constant company and Shmi's loving presence, provided Anakin with a safe and welcoming home. Sporadic contact with the Wookiees also helped the boy learn the values of friendship, loyalty, and respect for nature. The Wookiees, with their immense strength and sensitivity to the Force due to their strong connection with the natural world, were an example of how the Force could be respected and used in harmony with the environment. Anakin grew up in a circle of physical and emotional safety, supported by beings who shared a deep connection with life around them. With the guidance of two experienced masters, Yelder and Jolee, young Anakin developed in an environment conducive to his growth. Discipline, self-control, and respect for the Force were taught to him daily, while his natural curiosity was encouraged. Yelder knew he was facing a huge responsibility, but he felt supported by Jolee's guidance and the serenity of Kashyyyk Forest. While Anakin progressed in his training, Yelder intensified the practices related to mastering the Force. Each session became an opportunity to deepen not only theoretical knowledge, but also the practice of the energy that guided everything in the universe. Anakin assimilated the principles of the Force with surprising speed, and Yelder, while admiring the young apprentice's speed, kept an eye out for any sign of imbalance that might arise on his journey. Meditation sessions were an essential part of the training, and Anakin, still very young, was already able to remain in states of deep introspection for long periods. Each time he returned from these sessions, he told his master of visions and perceptions that went beyond what Yelder had experienced, and each conversation between them revealed Anakin's extraordinary potential. The intuitive knowledge that Anakin brought back from these journeys through the Force left Yelder intrigued and, at times, apprehensive about what he might become. The relationship between master and apprentice evolved in a unique way. Yelder interspersed ancient Jedi stories with practical lessons that transcended common teaching. Anakin absorbed everything with an understanding unusual for his age, accumulating a vast knowledge of the Jedi Order and its values. From an early age, he knew details about ancient masters, legendary battles, and the scriptures that Yelder kept in his memory. With each new learning experience, Anakin was also challenged to adapt and develop the techniques, creating variations that only someone with an unusual connection to the Force would be able to imagine. This process of creative exploration became a fundamental part of the training, and so Anakin began to create his own style, something distinct from the Jedi tradition, but which dialogued with it in an innovative and profound way. Even though Anakin showed self-control and wisdom, Yelder realized the dangers that awaited him due to the immense power he was developing so early. With this in mind, he decided to include practices that would test the young apprentice more intensely. He provoked Anakin emotionally, seeking to arouse challenging feelings such as fear, anger, and frustration, allowing him to experience the dark side of the Force under controlled conditions. Yelder's intention was clear: to prepare Anakin so that he could recognize and deal with his own shadows, rather than ignoring them. The transmutation techniques he passed on to Anakin were based on self-control and balance, so that the young Jedi would learn to reverse his state of discomfort and transform dense emotions into serenity. This process, although difficult, made Anakin increasingly aware of dark energies and how to neutralize them wisely. Intensive training with the dark side made Anakin an unusual master, endowed with a rare skill. He knew how to live with his most intense and destructive emotions without letting them overwhelm him. This learning made him someone capable of moving between light and shadow, understanding both sides of the Force and manipulating them with impressive dexterity. It was as if he had learned to shape the flow of the Force itself. Yelder also trained him in the use of the lightsaber, intensifying his use of combinations and combat techniques that few Jedi knew. Anakin, with his innate skill, mastered each movement with ease, but his focus was not only on technique. He integrated each step with the connection he felt with the Force, allowing his movements to be guided by intuition and not just repetition. Over time, Anakin began to develop absolute control over himself in pressure situations. The challenges imposed by Yelder forced him to face limits that many Jedi Masters avoided. However, Anakin learned to take advantage of discomfort, using pain and frustration as portals to access deeper levels of the Force and expanding his ability to act. Living with the dark side on a daily basis did not corrupt him. On the contrary, it made Anakin a complete being, aware of the extremes and the balance he would need to tread his own path. Yelder watched his apprentice's progress with pride, realizing that Anakin was not just a Jedi, but a being shaped for something far beyond the limits imposed by the Order. He was ready to decide his own destiny. Over the years of their training, Anakin and Yelder became an absolutely unique duo. Their connection to the Force transcended the common boundaries between master and apprentice, and this attunement was evident not only in the skills they demonstrated, but also in the depth of their mutual understanding. Over time, they developed a level of understanding and cooperation that no Jedi had yet experienced. Their practices and meditations became almost a silent dialogue, where the Force flowed between them harmoniously, uniting mind, body, and spirit in one goal. Then came a moment when Yelder realized something that surprised him deeply. Anakin had become more powerful than himself in combat skills and mastery of the Force. The dexterity and control that Anakin showed was superior to that of any other Jedi that Yelder had ever seen or trained. This awakening to the magnitude of Anakin's power brought an inevitable realization. Anakin was no longer a Padawan. However, Yelder also understood that the young man didn't fit the figure of a traditional Jedi either. There was something greater, a strength and a purpose that went beyond the Order. As Yelder pondered the nature of this unprecedented power, lost in his thoughts, Jolee suddenly and serenely appeared at his side. With a knowing look, Jolee agreed with Yelder's conclusions, recognizing Anakin's uniqueness. "I agree with you, my friend," said Jolee, recognizing that Anakin had become something never before seen among the Jedi. He emphasized that Anakin represented something new and powerful, something that transcended the definitions and limitations of the Jedi Order. "Your Padawan is ready," he added, confirming Yelder's suspicions that Anakin was destined for something greater. The next day, Anakin arrived for another training session and, upon entering, was confronted by the presence of Jolee at his master's side. It was the first time he had met Jolee in person, but Yelder had already told him about the legendary Jedi and the impact of his guidance on his own path. Seeing the two of them together, Anakin felt a mixture of curiosity and respect, realizing that this was a significant moment. Yelder then solemnly declared, "You are ready, Anakin. Now you are no longer a Padawan, you are a Jedi." Anakin caught the exchange of glances between Yelder and Jolee, understanding that those words had a meaning that went beyond the traditional knighthood. Jolee, sensing the disquiet and doubt in Anakin's eyes, added that the Republic was going through a critical phase, with deep problems and imminent tribulations. He explained that dark times were ahead and that the Jedi Order, as well as the Republic, was at risk. The only hope to prevent both from falling was the presence of an extraordinary being, someone capable of bringing balance to the Force and restoring peace. Jolee looked at Anakin, making it clear that she believed he was the chosen one, the one who could face and overcome these challenges. Approaching Anakin, Jolee spoke words full of meaning and emotion. "I've accompanied you since your birth," he said, with a serenity that impressed the young Jedi. "I've watched you grow into who you are today." It was a reminder that Anakin had always been under the observation of the Force and that his path had been guided and protected from the start. "You're ready. It's time to go to the capital and become what you were born to be," Jolee added, guiding Anakin to always remember his training, make decisions wisely, and fulfill his purpose of bringing balance to the Force. Deeply moved by Jolee's words and his master Yelder's support, Anakin felt a mixture of responsibility and confidence grow inside him. He absorbed every word with special attention, realizing that this moment marked the beginning of his journey on an even higher level. With a gesture of respect and thanks, Anakin bowed his head slightly, showing his agreement and honor at what had been entrusted to him. He knew he was ready to face the challenges that awaited him, with the Force and the teachings of his masters as his guides. Yelder and Anakin prepared for the journey to Coruscant, leaving Shmi with a mixture of sadness and pride. The farewell was silent, but full of emotion. Shmi, who had seen her son grow up under Yelder's tutelage, knew that he was destined for great things. With a look of encouragement, she hugged Anakin for the last time before his departure. Anakin promised her that he would do everything he could to honor what he had learned and follow her path. With this promise in mind, he and Yelder left Kashyyyk and headed for Coruscant, where new discoveries awaited them. When they arrived in the capital, Yelder and Anakin immediately went to the Jedi Temple to find Jocasta Nu, Yelder's old teacher. He knew that Jocasta would be the ideal person to introduce Anakin to the vast knowledge of the Jedi and guide him through the formal environment of the temple. He also wanted to share with her the experiences and revelations he had had over the years. Anakin watched everything with curious eyes, impressed by the grandeur of Coruscant and the reverent atmosphere that surrounded the Jedi Temple. Jocasta welcomed Yelder with emotion and pride, embracing her former Padawan. When her eyes turned to Anakin, she analyzed him with a curious, almost incredulous look. "Is that what I think it is?" she asked with an expression of surprise. Yelder confirmed, "Yes, that's my Padawan, Anakin. In fact, now a Jedi." Looking at Anakin, they both exchanged a discreet smile, while Anakin respectfully introduced himself. "It's an honor to meet you." Jocasta smiled, noticing the young man's joviality, and commented in surprise, "But so young." Yelder replied with a smile, "Yes, we have a lot to talk about." Yelder asked Jocasta to allow Anakin to explore the library while they talked. Jocasta consented enthusiastically, indicating that he should make himself at home. Yelder pointed to a special section, suggesting, "Why don't you start there?" It was the area dedicated to the history of the ancient Jedi, where records of the Order's foundation and earliest eras were kept. Anakin, his eyes shining with enthusiasm, went to the section with reverence, eager to immerse himself in all that knowledge. As he entered the library, Anakin was amazed by the vastness of the place and the quantity of records and artifacts. What he saw surpassed any expectations he had ever had. He felt like a child in awe in front of an abundance of information, looking at each title and exploring the holograms that contained the old archives. Each discovery seemed to ignite a new flame of curiosity, and he knew he would have a lot to learn there. Anakin, overwhelmed by excitement, didn't even know where to begin. He felt like he was in an amusement park, surrounded by a sea of unexplored knowledge. His mind was buzzing with questions, and he wanted to absorb as much as possible. For him, that library was a portal to the secrets of the Force and the history of the Jedi, and he could hardly contain his eagerness to explore that new universe. Meanwhile, Jocasta and Yelder walked through the corridors of the library towards her room. Along the way, Yelder told Jocasta everything he had experienced since leaving the temple, the difficulties he had faced, his experiences with the Force and the in-depth studies that had shaped him as a Jedi. Jocasta listened attentively, admiring the courage and dedication of her former Padawan, who had followed his own path and achieved a unique understanding of the Force. After a long conversation, Jocasta asked about Anakin, curious about the boy's story. Yelder told her about Anakin's journey, his unusual talent, and the contact they had with Jolee, which surprised Jocasta. "Jolee, the Jedi from the Old Republic?" she asked, clearly impressed. Yelder confirmed with a nod, explaining that Jolee had guided them and helped them understand Anakin's destiny, and that Jolee himself believed that Anakin was destined for something much greater. Yelder then revealed to Jocasta about the prophecy of the Chosen One, something she knew well. He explained that he believed Anakin was the being mentioned in the ancient prophecy, the only one capable of restoring balance to the Force in times of crisis. Jocasta looked at him with an expression of seriousness and surprise, absorbing the weight of the revelation. She interrupted Yelder, anxious. Are you saying that your Padawan is the chosen one, the one who will bring balance to the Force? Yelder confirmed, knowing that this revelation would change Jocasta's perception of the young Jedi forever. Yelder began to recount Anakin's training since childhood. He explained to Jocasta that Anakin started long before the conventional age set by the Jedi Order, because from a young age he already showed an above-average curiosity and intelligence. He recounted how young Anakin absorbed new knowledge with impressive ease, almost as if the information was waiting to be awakened in him. Every technique, every teaching, seemed to flow naturally through him, and Yelder saw this as a sign that Anakin was destined for something great. Yelder also described Anakin's unique connection to the Force, something that went beyond normal comprehension. He explained to Jocasta that it often seemed as if the Force itself emanated from within Anakin, like a living, pulsating energy source. This connection was so intense that, while it made him powerful, it also brought difficulties, especially with regard to emotional control. Yelder told how he had used the techniques he had studied and developed in his exile to help Anakin find balance, but that this had always been a constant challenge. Jocasta listened attentively, impressed by the precision of events and the way the Force guided Yelder and Anakin's paths so that they could meet. She realized that all Yelder's experiences and studies had prepared him to train the Chosen One, and that the Force seemed to have orchestrated this union. Jocasta was amazed at how destiny had unfolded and shown itself so clearly at that moment, with all the paths leading to the development of Anakin's full potential. Then Jocasta expressed her desire to see Anakin again. There was something about that young man that intrigued her, and she wanted to observe him up close. Yelder, with a smile of pride and satisfaction, immediately consented. He knew that Anakin was special and that Jocasta, with her wisdom and experience, could glimpse something even deeper about him. Together, they walked towards the library area where Anakin was still immersed in his exploration of the Jedi records. When they found Anakin, he was engrossed in a book on the history of the Jedi, deeply moved as he read the stories that Yelder had already told him, but which now took on new meaning as they were discovered in the source itself. The young Jedi looked up when he saw Yelder and Jocasta, his eyes buzzing with excitement. Yelder, curious, asked what he was reading, and Anakin showed him the book, with a picture of a Jedi he already recognized. It was Jolee. Seeing this, Yelder and Jocasta exchanged a smile, and then Jocasta said softly, "Come with me." Jocasta led Yelder and Anakin into a laboratory-like room, where she asked Anakin to hold out his arm. The young Jedi, intrigued, obeyed, and Jocasta applied a light prick with a cylinder that collected a sample of his blood. She and Yelder then looked closely at a screen displaying the results. Jocasta was surprised to see a number of midichlorians like she had never encountered before. This was yet another concrete confirmation of everything Yelder had described about Anakin's power and the Chosen One's prophecy. After processing the results, Jocasta signaled for everyone to walk together through the corridors of the Jedi Temple. As they walked, she took the opportunity to question Anakin about his vision of the Force. The young Jedi's answer was profound and revealing. He described the Force as the interconnection of all things, the energy that shapes the universe and unites us all, the wisdom that grows with meditation, and the nature that blooms with each new spring. His words revealed an intuitive and almost poetic understanding of the Force, something that deeply touched Jocasta and even Yelder. When they heard this answer, Jocasta remained silent, watching Anakin with a mixture of admiration and surprise. She realized that the young man not only had an intense connection with the Force, but also a deep philosophical understanding, rare even among the most experienced Jedi. After a few moments of silence, she moved her eyes to Yelder, without moving her face, as if silently confirming what he already knew. Then, in a firm, respectful voice, she said, "I'm going to arrange an audience with the Council. You must introduce him to the Masters." Yelder agreed, understanding the importance of the next step in Anakin's development. He knew that the introduction to the Council would be a significant milestone and proof of how far the young Jedi had come. For Anakin, it would mean being recognized by the Order, and for Yelder, it was confirmation that he had fulfilled his role as the Chosen One's mentor and guide. Yelder and Anakin entered the imposing Jedi Council room, where Yelder was able to see his former masters, including Yoda and Mace Windu. The presence of such respected and powerful figures imposed a certain weight on the atmosphere, but Anakin kept his composure at his master's side, aware of the importance of the moment. Yelder felt a mixture of nostalgia and pride at being reunited with those who had shaped his own journey in the Order, now with Anakin by his side. Yoda took the lead, breaking the silence in the room with his calm, wise voice. "Good to see you again, young Yelder." Yelder, with a slight smile and a respectful bow, replied, "Likewise, Master. That was my Padawan, Anakin Skywalker, now a Jedi." Yoda turned to Anakin and said, "How do you do, young man?" Anakin replied firmly, "Well, Master, it's an honor to meet you." Yoda, with a nod and a slight smile, continued, "Jocasta has told us that you have something important to reveal to us." Taking the floor, Yelder explained that yes, he did have something important to share, and then began to briefly tell his story. He recounted his exile, the discovery of Jolee, and the revelations about the prophecy of the Chosen One. The Masters listened attentively, exchanging glances at every detail, especially when Yelder mentioned that he believed Anakin to be the Chosen One. Yelder sensed the seriousness of the situation and the responsibility of his words, aware of the impact this revelation would have. The Masters looked at each other in surprise, but Mace Windu, with an expression of skepticism, was the first to speak. "So, you're telling me that your young Padawan is the Chosen One, the one who will bring balance to the Force?" His voice was firm, and his penetrating gaze showed a caution that Yelder understood. He knew the claim was bold and that convincing the Masters of something so grand would take time and probably trials. Before Yelder could respond, a hologram of Obi-Wan Kenobi suddenly appeared in the center of the room, transmitting an urgent message. He informed them that he was on Geonosis and that the situation was rapidly deteriorating. He said that Count Dooku was leading an army of droids and that the situation was critical. Obi-Wan also mentioned that he had discovered the existence of a clone army in the service of the Republic, something that took the Masters by surprise, further increasing the tension in the room. Yoda, after processing the information, said, "We'll continue later." Mace Windu, already on his feet and with a determined expression, turned to Yelder and suggested, "Why don't you come with your Padawan with us to Geonosis, Yelder?" Yelder nodded positively, understanding the gravity of the situation and seeing it as an opportunity to show Anakin's potential in combat. So everyone prepared to leave for the battlefield on Geonosis. When they arrived on Geonosis, they were faced with a real battle in an arena full of droids and soldiers. Mace Windu, who had landed first, was already in full action in the arena, facing his enemies. Soon after, Yelder and Anakin arrived alongside Yoda, who was guiding them with precision. Anakin and Yelder immediately joined the Jedi fighting, synchronizing with the movements of the other warriors, but also standing out for the harmony they shared in combat. As the battle intensified, Yoda, Mace Windu, and the other Jedi were able to observe Anakin's impressive skill. His speed, precision, and connection to the Force were remarkable, allowing him to move fluidly and effectively between enemies. Alongside Yelder, he seemed to anticipate his opponent's every move, demonstrating a combat ability that surprised even the most experienced Masters. There, Anakin began to show that the power he carried was not ordinary. With every move, Anakin's strength and mastery of the Force stood out. He dodged attacks, deflected shots, and used the Force to destabilize the droids around him with surprising ease. The Masters present realized that Anakin had a deep and rare connection with the Force, something that went beyond standard training. In the midst of the chaos, he seemed to be guided by an unbreakable and powerful energy, which gave him a clear advantage in battle. During the battle, Yelder spotted Count Dooku, a former Jedi who had now become a dangerous separatist leader, fleeing to an isolated area, followed by Obi-Wan. Yelder quickly realized the importance of stopping Dooku and decided to follow them, believing that Anakin would accompany him. Without hesitation, he set off in pursuit of the Count, leaving Anakin behind, but certain that he would make the same decision to follow them. Anakin noticed Yelder's movements and watched as he set off in the direction of Dooku and Obi-Wan. Determined not to be left behind, he used the Force tracking techniques he had learned to find his master and the other Jedi. Concentrating, Anakin closed his eyes for a moment and let the Force guide him, sensing the presence of Yelder and Dooku, until he was finally able to locate the path they had taken. Following the vibrations of the Force, Anakin arrived at a kind of isolated cave, where he sensed that a confrontation was about to take place. When Anakin entered the cave, the scene unfolding before him was devastating. He saw Obi-Wan Kenobi lying on the ground, trapped by a gigantic piece of metal that immobilized his legs, and he also witnessed his master Yelder fighting Count Dooku alone. The situation was critical and, for a moment, time seemed to stand still as Anakin tried to process the gravity of what was happening. Just as Anakin was preparing to intervene, he saw Dooku's red saber pierce Yelder's abdomen. The young Jedi cried out in despair, "No!" and ran towards his master while Dooku stood back, watching the scene with an air of superiority and indifference. Anakin knelt beside Yelder, holding him and putting his head in his lap, trying to contain the pain that was already taking over his heart. Yelder, already very weak, looked at his apprentice and, in a weak voice, said, "My path ends here, Anakin. I have fulfilled my mission." Anakin, desperate, tried to interrupt him. "No, Master, don't say that." But Yelder continued calmly, "Pay attention. You are ready. Now you must follow your own path and fulfill your mission. Just be the best Jedi you can be. Remember everything you've learned and make good choices." With a final sigh, Yelder tried to pronounce a blessing, "May the Force." But before he could finish, he closed his eyes forever. Anakin's sadness quickly turned to deep, uncontrollable anger. He held his master's body, but his eyes were already fixed on Dooku, who was watching the scene from afar. Obi-Wan, who was witnessing everything from where he was, tried to intervene, throwing his saber at Anakin. "Hey, kid, take it." But Anakin only made a negative sign with his hand, deflecting the saber with the Force, refusing it. His hatred was focused on Dooku, and he intended to confront the Count directly. Dooku, sensing Anakin's approach and the hatred emanating from him, tried to dissuade him with a tone of false compassion. "Don't do it, young man," he said contemptuously. Then he added, "Then I'll make sure your end is swift," and with a calculated move, he launched Force lightning directly at Anakin, believing that the attack would destroy him. To the amazement of Dooku and Obi-Wan, who was watching, the Force beams fired by the Count dissipated just 2 meters from Anakin, as if an invisible barrier were protecting him. Anakin advanced, unperturbed, with impressive energy, as if he had created a force field around himself, a technique he had developed with Yelder's help. Dooku, stunned, tried to understand what was happening, but had no time to react. When Anakin got close enough, he drew his saber with surprising speed. In one fluid movement, he used the Force to bend Dooku's knees, destabilizing him. With one swift cut, Anakin severed the arm holding the red saber and, in one final, fulminating blow, struck the Count squarely in the neck, ending the confrontation definitively and leaving a mark of power that would haunt all who witnessed it. With Dooku defeated, Anakin turned his attention to Obi-Wan, who was still trapped under the gigantic piece of metal. With a simple wave of his hand and intense concentration on the Force, Anakin lifted the heavy metal with impressive ease, freeing Obi-Wan from his prison. Kneeling beside the Jedi, he asked with concern, "Are you all right?" Obi-Wan, impressed by Anakin's strength and skill, replied, still stunned, "Who are you, young man?" Anakin answered simply, "My name is Anakin. Come on, let's get out of here." Shortly afterwards, Yoda arrived on the scene, finding Anakin and Obi-Wan still in shock from the events they had just experienced. After returning to Coruscant, Obi-Wan gave the Jedi Council a detailed account of everything he had witnessed, from Dooku's stunning defeat to Anakin's supernatural ability to withstand the rays of the Force. The Masters, listening to the story, fell silent, exchanging thoughtful and cautious glances. Yoda, after reflecting deeply on what he had heard, muttered to himself, but audibly enough for the others. Then perhaps the chosen one, the young man, really is. Mace Windu, with a serious expression, agreed with a slight nod, while the other masters remained immersed in thought, contemplating what Anakin's presence could mean for the future of the Jedi Order and the Republic.